Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
From her rich and fertile valleys to the shores of her icy seas, from her fields and farms and shellfish beds and her many nurseries, for the finest of her flavor, for the freshest by far, choose the things Alaskans bring to the market where you are. Products that we're proud to call our own, and it's all Alaska grown.
The National Weather Service.
Good evening, Alaska. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It is the 14th of September, and as always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information, no matter how you choose to do that. Any information is good information that keeps you one step ahead of the next storm. You can always call our weather info line at 800-472-0391. That's available 24 hours a day. And if you're the first time caller, no problem, but you'll want to listen to the prompts that guide you through to the right spot of the weather forecast. Write those numbers down, and the next time you can do that a little bit faster. You can always check out our website as well, weather.gov/Alaska. And some of you are still looking for a mobile-friendly option, something you can use on your tablet or on your phone, something that has a lot less bandwidth. Whether you have a really good high-speed connection, we can get you a mobile link for that. Or if you have a really low-speed connection and you're out in the bush and you're really struggling with the new website, let me know. I'll get you a better link, and we can make sure that you have some very fast and same quality data that you're used to, but with the new links thanks to that new web page. You can email me at nws.ar.tvweather@noaa.gov or david.snider@noaa.gov. I'm happy to help you anytime with that information, and we'd like to make it work for you no matter what part of Alaska you're watching from tonight. Speaking of watching, time change is coming again. Alaska Public Broadcasting, the ARC system, still live at 5:30, but some changes for our Fairbanks friends watching at 6:30 tonight on KUAC 9.4. In about a week, or next Monday anyway, starting next Monday, you're going to see Alaska Weather at 5:30, still on the 9.4 channel there. So KUAC viewers on 9.4 and Cable Channel 6 in Fairbanks, your show's moving to 5:30. Everything else is going to stay the same. 360 North, no matter where you're watching from, 7:30. Alaska Public Media stations will be watching at 5 o'clock in the morning. And don't forget about YouTube. You can still watch anytime there. Two ways to get there. Go to the TV desk page on weather.gov/Anchorage and find the YouTube link there on our page. Or go to the search bar on YouTube and type in AKwx TV. That, of course, is Alaska Weather for short. On to the Alaska weather at hand. A winter storm warning is still in effect. That's been extended from the last time we spoke last night across the north and eastern Brooks Range. That will continue above 2,000 feet until about 8 o'clock tonight. So just a little bit longer for that winter storm warning. We're expecting stormfall snow totals to be around 6 to 12 inches or so. Earlier this morning, got a report of about 4 inches around Coldfoot. So we know it was snowing up there. And again, not too surprising with the weather at hand there. So a winter storm warning in effect for at least a couple more hours there for our friends watching anywhere in the northeastern parts of the Brooks Range there. Stay warm, stay safe. Here's a look at the satellite picture, and once again, our major weather feature is the low pressure system. It's kind of a combo deal. There's several waves embedded in this overall circulation here. But you can see that we're getting a lot of moisture working northward. In fact, we have two streams for the price of one tonight across the Gulf of Alaska. The first has a lot more moisture in it than the second one does. Now, if you're watching from Seward tonight, or let's say, oh gosh, even, let me get my finger on the right part of Seward, there we go. You'll notice that we've got a little bit of dry air coming in across the open waters of the Gulf right now. So this is good because this stream is disconnected from the one that's coming toward south central in the Kenai Peninsula. This stream has a lot of moisture in it. This one, not so much. Not as much as what you just experienced a couple days ago. So if you're thinking, oh no, another atmospheric river's pointed right at my home on the Kenai Peninsula, Not as much. Not as much as it was just a couple days ago when you've got just a huge downpour for the region there, inches upon inches. This one, moving to southeastern Alaska, yes, does have some rain in it, and you'll probably pick up a couple inches as this moves through. The winds are going to come up again. And we're even watching for the threat of some thunder and lightning here, generally west of Yakutat to almost Cordova, not quite, but some of that could extend a little bit east of Yakutat as well as we get into the daytime tomorrow. So if you see some lightning, go into shelter, get to safe harbor. If you hear the thunder, don't be surprised, and also do the same thing. Move to safe shelter and safe harbor as soon as you can. Let's watch the loop one more time, because as we know, the satellite picture really tells us the story. If you look up north, we have a pretty persistent northwesterly flow. What's that doing? Well, it's taking what's left of the sea ice year and still pushing that toward the north slope. So that is still working its way toward the Arctic coast, at least for another 24 hours or so. We've got that persistent northwesterly flow that's pushing any remaining ice closer and closer to Wainwright to about Barrow is where that seems to be. We'll see the sea ice map here in just a little bit. As you look out across the interior, what's going on there? Well, moisture is working its way northward, of course, and we've continued to see periods of rainfall across the region throughout today, and nothing quite as widespread it looked like as what we saw yesterday. There's dry air across Kotzebue Sound, a little bit of sunshine perhaps for you today. And out across the west, well, a persistent low pressure system right across the Aleutians will keep things active, though the bulk of the precipitation and wind will all be across the Gulf, southwest, south central, and southeastern Alaska, especially as we go into the next 24 hours. Here is our service map for the day. 979 millibar low out across the western chain, 985 millibar low northeast of St. Paul. 1006 low sitting up in the upper Kuskokwim Valley or so, just northeast of McGrath. And then the next weather maker for southeast is this guy here across the eastern Gulf at 1007 millibars. It does have a little bit of cold air behind it, certainly some drier air, and this is working that moisture northward, so expect this to spread out and watch for the winds to come up a little bit more as well. High pressure is getting out of the way. That's about 1024 millibars. The north slope still looking at snow as we saw with that winter storm warning in. There's still enough warm air in the region that some of that at lower terrain could be mixing in, and probably is, with rainfall there. So not just a snow event, but also a little bit of a shoulder season event there for some of the Brooks Range and the North Slope. Rainfall continues out across the west, as you would imagine, with a pretty expansive area of low pressure for really most of the Bering Sea. The wave will move up Cook Inlet tonight, about 998 millibars, and the occluded front is going to work its way into the central Gulf. Now remember, this second stream, we'll call this one the first one that's moving over southeast, has really got the bulk of the moisture with it. So this one's loaded, this one's kind of a rainfall light, let's say, kind of the rain on a diet. 998 millibar low is working its way northward and eastward. Behind that, all of this is just getting stirred up, so there's not a really big temperature change. It's just going to be cool, cloudy, murky, and rainy, it looks like. Out across the interior, periods of snow will still be possible through tonight, but remember, the winter storm warning ends at 8. After that, we'll start to see diminishing snow from west to east, and by tomorrow afternoon, a lot of that really will have fallen apart. Don't be surprised to see some lingering snow showers there. But now we'll turn our attention to the next reinforcing wave of rainfall across southeast. As that second stream catches up with the first, that frontal boundary there will kind of lock in a little bit of additional storm energy across the northern Gulf. So from about Yakutat westward again, we have that opportunity of seeing showers and thunderstorms there. Just kind of a slight chance, but don't be surprised. And you'll look at the southeast, and all this is filled in again with periods of steady rainfall for many locations up and down the Panhandle tomorrow. The winds will be a little bit stronger as well, and watch for that to change as the system starts to move its way through as we head into Thursday and Friday. Out west, the trough of low pressure extends all the way up the west coast into Kotzebue Sound, over Norton Sound, and just west of Bristol Bay to about the Pribilofs. With that, we still get that warmer, southerly, wetter flow working its way into the lower and middle Yukon Valley. On the western side, though, that's colder air. It's not substantially colder than what you have, but it's going to be noticeable, and it should be a little bit drier, though you'll probably end up with clouds and drizzle more than anything else. Across the interior, periods of rain and snow will be possible on the very northern fringe. Some folks along the Yukon Valley could see a little bit of that mixing as we get into Thursday. And then on Friday, not a whole lot of change for the interior. It does look like a front's going to park right over your backyard. With that, that could be the focus for some wetter weather, at least into the beginning of the weekend. Across Gulf Coast communities, showers and rainfall should be expected. Same goes for southeast, but you'll notice that pressure gradient has lessened somewhat across your region, so the winds should also let up, as you'll notice in the rain weather here in a bit. Showers across the Aleutians and other weather makers coming its way from the west there, but we've got a ridge of high pressure that is in between at the moment, so this should help stabilize the weather, at least briefly, across parts of the Bering. And up north, another trough of low pressure, a disturbance coming in off the Chukchi coast will bring another round of precipitation, some of that cold enough for snow, and some of that starting to mix back in toward rain on the southern extent of the Chukchi coast and into Kotzebue Sound. So an awful lot going on, as there always is in September in Alaska. Here's a look at temps this hour. Upper 50s across southeast, just shy of 60 really for most parts of southeast. The capital city at 57. Same goes for our friends in Sitka, Ketchikan, and Annette in the upper 50s. Hyder was 61. Craig and Klawock in the upper 50s. Prince William Sound temperatures saw readings in the lower to mid 50s today. Cordova was 55. Down the coast, 57 in Yakutat. Looked like Valdez was 51. Seward, another cool and wet day, 50. 58 in Homer, 53 for Kenai. Looks like Anchorage was around 50 today. Talkeetna not too far behind today. And into parts of Gulkana and Glen Allen, readings there anywhere from the 40s to the east, out in the country a little bit, to about 57 in Gulkana, 54 around Northway and Tok, 53 for Eagle, 54 in Fairbanks there, and 36 up the road in Fort Yukon. Much cooler still to the north. Arctic Village was 28, 25 for Anaktuvik Pass. Again, watch for dangerous and tricky driving conditions if you're heading up the Dalton Highway. Look for temps in the 30s tonight for most areas across the North Slope and the Arctic coast, at or even below freezing. That includes Barrow, down to Wainwright, Kaktovik, Prudhoe Bay, and Dead Horse included. 30s and 40s for Kotzebue Sound today. Kotzebue was 41, Shishmaref 39, Nome at 44, Savunga, looks like a good chunk of St. Lawrence Island in the upper 30s today. Unalakleet was 46, Galena had 44, Bethel was 55 degrees, and around Lake Iliamna also in the mid-50s. Lower 60s as you head down toward Cape Sarichef, and a good chunk of the Alaska Peninsula was in the mid-50s today. Sandpoint 57, 54 for St. Paul, about 57 for Unalaska and Dutch Harbor, and lower 50s from Adak, Atka, and all the way out toward Shemya. Overnight low temps in the north, holding right about at freezing or just below again, as I said. Ambler, Bettles in the 20s and 30s, 41 in Fairbanks, upper 40s for south central. Southeast, you're looking at temps in the lower to mid 50s. Southwest in the 40s, 39 for Savunga, and 40s and 50s for the Chain and the Alaska Peninsula. Kodiak tomorrow, 59, upper 50s for south central once again. About the same for southeast with plenty of clouds, rain, and some wind. 44 in Fort Yukon, 57 around Fairbanks with temps in the lower 30s for most of the North Slope and the Arctic coast. Kotzebue Sound temps in the 30s and 40s. 47 around Nome, 50 in Unalakleet and McGrath. Let's say about 56 degrees for your daytime high. On to flying weather. Expect IFR conditions for the Chukchi Coast, parts of the Brooks Range in the morning, and parts of southeast, of course, as well as Prince William Sound. In the afternoon, we're really going to focus on areas from east of Yakutat to probably about Valdez for IFR. Most other coastal areas will be dealing with MVFR conditions, as well as those around the middle Yukon Valley throughout the daytime and parts of the southwest coast. Here's a look at pass conditions. Anaktuvik Pass should see some improvements. We'll hope for VFR as we get through the afternoon tomorrow. Again, snow showers should be diminishing tonight and continue quickly into tomorrow, with VFR expected in Adigan Pass. Also looking for improvements in Lake Clark and Merrill Pass as we go throughout the day. Rainy Pass may hold around MVFR. Look for that to continue for Windy Pass throughout the day. Marginal conditions there, and for Isabel Pass as we get into your Thursday. Mentasta Pass, VFR conditions are expected. We expect conditions to lean over toward marginal as we get into Tanita Pass, and Portage Pass should also be looking at improvements. Chilkoot and White Pass, we expect to see marginal conditions through most of your Thursday. The cold air continues to drop southward with that northwesterly flow. You'll see levels as low as 2,000 feet south of the Brooks Range and right along the Yukon Valley into places like Nome, a 4,000-foot level just north of the Pribilofs, the 8,000-foot line right over the Lind Canal and just south of Yakutat. And for southeast, those levels as high as 10,000 feet for your region. So you can see winter's trying to make a comeback. Well, don't call it a comeback just yet. As we look at most of the west coast, there will be some occasional moderate potential there across the west. There's a lot of wet air hovering over Alaska. The trick is where's that cold air? And so far, a lot of that cold air is still pretty high up there. So anywhere from about 8,000 to 10,000 feet for most cases. But again, watch for icing potential to be a little bit higher than the last few days across many parts of the interior, southeast, and the west coast throughout your day. Now, jet stream potential shows the dominant trough coming across the Pacific, racing at 100 to 135 knots and then taking a pretty good bend right up to the north. And this is where that atmospheric river is. That's exactly what's tapping into that tropical moisture. But we still have cold air coming in from the northwest as well across the Arctic Ocean. That's racing in to northern parts of Canada, about 60 to 105 knots. So at 9,000 feet, northerlies are moving across the Bering. We've got southerlies across the Gulf, feeding rain into southeast and the Gulf Coast, and winds diminish across the interior at this level at 15 to 20 knots with a westerly flow moving across the Arctic coast. 3,000 feet, it looks pretty similar there. The speeds are a little different, 15 to 25 knots from generally east to west for the interior, southerlies for south central, and you can see low pressure sitting just outside of Bristol Bay, a broad southwesterly flow working into southeastern Alaska, and northerlies are in charge of the Bering and the Aleutians at 25 to about 30 knots in many cases. So turbulence, well, we're going to watch for that across southern parts of southeast below 4,000 feet. Watch for those thunderstorms and a barrier jet to form across the northern Gulf tomorrow. Watch for some chop across Bristol Bay below 4,000 feet, over St. Lawrence Island and St. Matthew below 4,000, and also across the chain, mainly in the Central Islands as well as the Pribilofs. That's a look at your aviation forecast. I'll be back with your Sea Ice Edge update as well as the marine forecast in just a few minutes.
The following program is brought to you by the Ocean Alaska Science and Learning Center, a partnership dedicated to understanding and preserving the marine ecosystem connecting Alaska's national parks through research and education. The pristine wilderness of Kenai Fjords National Park is becoming increasingly popular as a destination for kayak campers. As visitor use increases, so does the interaction and potential for conflict between humans and wildlife. Black bears are abundant along the park's coastline, and park managers are interested in preventing negative interactions and protecting both bears and park visitors. A team of researchers is investigating how bears react to human presence in Kenai Fjords National Park. Steve Partridge, biologist with the U.S. Geological Survey, is one of the principal investigators in this study.
I think the original focus of it was to try to determine how people's activities in the fjords here affect bear behavior, and especially in places like these meadows that are really important, especially early on for bears. Typically they're losing weight right now as before the berries come out, so anything they can get in the way of green vegetation is good for them. So I think what we wanted to initially do is look at how people moving around in the meadows or approaching on kayaks or power boats affected these bears in the meadows. And so what we've done is found bears in these meadows, and depending on where the bears were, we might approach them on a power boat, or we might try to get in on a kayak. But what we're doing is we're with laser rangefinders, we're trying to figure out when the bear notices the person's approach first, and so that would be a distance that we definitely want. And then the next distance we would want, at what point does the bear change its behavior from what it was doing previously, which is generally foraging, to maybe just staring at us now and not eating anymore. And then the probably most important one is, at what point does the bear decide now it wants to leave, it's uncomfortable, people are too close.
Researchers patrolled areas known to be frequented by black bears in early spring. When they sighted a bear, they began a systematic approach, recording the bear's behavior as they drew nearer and nearer.
Bear on the right's watching us too. 205. Yeah.
I'm not sure the exact numbers, but I want to say probably what we'd call the flushing distance, probably averaged right around 100 meters, which I think is fairly consistent.
Since black bears are so abundant in Kenai Fjords, park managers have made efforts to limit human and bear interactions by providing food storage lockers or lines for hanging food on the most popular beaches, and requiring bear-resistant food containers at other locations. Containers can be checked out at the park headquarters in Seward free of charge.
I don't think that this park has had any history of I mean, a few, I think, tent destruction cases, but nothing serious where any kind of, injury was involved, I don't believe. So I don't know, it wasn't a safety issue, I think. It's maybe just trying to look and see if we could, as this part of the bay becomes more popular, try to get in ahead of the curve and putting together some really good guidelines for kayakers to try to minimize any disturbance that people may have in these meadows.
The Nuka Bay region, where Partridge's team was working, is the more seldom visited part of Kenai Fjords National Park. It also contains more extensive meadow habitat than the more steep-sided fjords elsewhere in the park.
And these places provide some of the only opportunities they have, or the earliest opportunities they have to get grass. And a lot of these places that are snow-free, at least back to a little ways. So there's always a little vegetation on the periphery that they can get. So it's definitely important in early season, and just good forage for them, I think. So.
Another part of the study involved monitoring the most productive meadows with time-lapse video cameras for several days with no humans present, then establishing a camp in the meadow to see if the bear's foraging behavior was affected. This data has not been fully analyzed yet. In general, though, Partridge was surprised at how oblivious some bears can be to human presence.
Or there's some misconception about how much bears are paying attention to their surroundings. I think a lot of people think they're really tuned into everything and they can, they see you at a mile or smell you at a mile. But I think a lot of times, since they're not typically worried about predators, they kind of, get in their own little world like the absent-minded professor. And boy, I've surprised a lot of bears, and as probably a lot of other people have, without trying it at all. So that was surprising that I think it's, I think sometimes they're not paying as much attention as you think they should be. You learn out here for sure how difficult it is to try to tease these things out. And I think probably, if nothing else, I think we'll get great data on the approaches. I think we can provide Kenai Fjords with some good information there. And I think a lot of people, if you just tell them that, hey, here's these meadows and there's going to be a lot of bears in there, and it's a good area for them to feed, they'll probably avoid those areas because they don't want to disturb the animals, and a lot of times they just need the information. And so hopefully we'll be able to provide a lot of good basic information on how these bears are using these meadows.
In the end, park managers hope to use the information that Partridge and his co-investigators are gathering to minimize the potential for negative or harmful interactions between bears and park visitors, while maximizing the opportunities for bears to thrive and people to enjoy the wilderness of Kenai Fjords National Park.
I think, we still have a really good chance up here to preserve wild populations of bears, and there's a lot of areas I think that there's really good conservation efforts. So for a bear biologist, this is a dream come true, I mean, there's just a lot of stuff to do up here. So.
Sea ice is still moving toward the Chukchi coast, toward Barrow down to Wainwright on that northwesterly wind that's persistent. You can check the latest forecast anytime at weather.gov/Anchorage/ice for a whole lot more information on that. We'll take a look at the winds here in just a minute. Let's look at southeast first, with a strong south and easterly flow development tomorrow. Low pressures to the west, rain and wind will be a part of your day, maybe even some thunderstorms around Yakutat and westward. 25 knots there with a southeast wind at 8-foot seas. Southerlies outside the Dixon entrance on a 30-knot wind with 10-foot seas, and some of those stronger winds will find their way into Clarence Strait as well. 30 knots with a 6-foot sea. Winds diminish in most areas at least a little bit on Friday. We're still holding onto that southerly flow for most areas. 15 to 20 knots on the inside with 3 to 4-foot seas on the outside. 7-foot seas, 15 to 20 knots, all from the south. As we look at south central, inside of Prince William Sound, 30 knots from the south and east with 7-foot seas, 9-foot seas on the outside. South and westerlies working up the western Gulf Coast at 15 to 25, and you can see southerlies working up Cook Inlet, only 10 to 15 there, but in Shelikof Strait, 20 knots with a 3-foot sea. That's coming in from the south. Winds will become more light and variable on Friday there, with northeasterlies coming down northern parts of Cook Inlet, 10 knots with a 3-foot sea. Southeasterlies working across the western Gulf at 15 to 25, 7 to as high as 10-foot seas there east of Kodiak Island, and easterlies inside of Prince William Sound at 20 knots with a 4-foot sea. Bristol Bay looking at southeasterlies at 20 knots, otherwise southerlies across the Pacific coast, 25 knots with a 12 to 14-foot sea for Friday. More of a northwesterly shift starts to build in from the west, 25 to 30 knots there. 11-foot seas on the Bering Sea coast and 12-foot seas on the Pacific coast with diminishing winds inside of Bristol Bay. 10 to 20 knots across the Bering Sea coast for Thursday in the Aleutians, 20 knots for the Pacific coast, 13 to 14-foot seas, and northerlies out west, 25 knots there with 13 to 14-foot seas. That becomes southwesterly by Friday, but look at the persistent northwesterly flow for the central and eastern chain, 20 to 25 in all areas, and 9 to as high as 11-foot seas in the region there for Friday. For the west coast, northerlies coming down through the Bering Strait. Again, these could be fairly blustery and certainly cold, 10 to 12-foot seas expected there on 35 knots, and northeasterlies working across from Nunivak Island down toward St. Paul and St. George, 25 knots there in the Pribilofs with a 10-foot sea. For Friday, a little bit of a northwesterly shift for the Kuskokwim Delta and the Pribilofs, 25 knots with a 6 to 11-foot sea. Northerlies persist in the northern Bering, 25 to 30 with seas north of Nunivak Island as high as 10 feet. For the North Slope, look at these westerlies there on Thursday, still working that ice eastward. Northerlies coming down from Cape Lisburne toward Kotzebue Sound, 15 to 25 with 3 to 6-foot seas. And then we get into a change. A southwesterly flow develops up the Chukchi coast and into the Beaufort Sea coast, 20 to 30 with 6 to 8-foot seas at their highest near Point Barrow and eastward Prudhoe Bay. Recapping tonight's weather, a winter storm warning continues for the northeastern Brooks Range above 2,000 feet until 8 o'clock tonight. Expecting stormfall totals between 6 and 12 inches there. So still a possibility for more snow and lingering effects on the highway there if you're traveling north or south. So do be careful if you're traveling through that region. Otherwise, showers for the Gulf Coast communities, a pickup in the rain and the wind for southeast as we go into tomorrow with a front just offshore, and a chance for thunderstorms in the northeastern Gulf there around the Yakutat region west toward Prince William Sound. Showers persist in the west, and wet weather continues for the Gulf with cooler weather trying to work its way southward and another disturbance working its way into the Chukchi coast as we head into the weekend with one way out in the west. Thanks for watching.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Support comes from the University of Alaska College Savings Plan, helping you and your child save for college every step of the way, from diapers to diploma. More information at uacollegesavings.com.
Alaska Public Media is pleased to present AK Passport, our new on-demand access portal for watching exclusive television programs. A members-only benefit, AK Passport offers an expanded